Bueno, ahora sí, estaba articulando cómo apagar la música en mi computadora y dejar de compartir todo a la misma vez. Bueno, bienvenidos a todos a este encuentro, a la conferencia inaugural del segundo semestre de la Facultad de Arquitectura, Diseño y Urbanismo. Le voy a dar la palabra a Marcelo Danza, que es el decano de la facultad. Marcelo.
Muchas gracias, Lucrecia, y antes que nada, una muy cálida bienvenida y un agradecimiento muy sincero a Lynda por acompañarnos hoy aquí. Hablábamos antes de que se diera acceso a sala con Lynda, que no ha podido visitar todavía Uruguay. Esta hubiera sido una fantástica ocasión de estar en Uruguay si no hubiera sido por el COVID, pero ya quedamos de algún modo en contacto y comprometidos para que pueda visitarnos personalmente en el futuro próximo, cosa que esperamos con mucho deseo realmente. Quiero sinceramente, además de darle la bienvenida y el agradecimiento a Lynda, agradecerles también a todos ustedes la participación en esta conferencia inaugural, que es una hermosa tradición que inauguró el decano Gustavo Sheps en su periodo de gestión frente a la facultad y que nos permite a todas y a todos, cada inicio de semestre, tomar contacto con lo que está pasando en el mundo, con lo que están pensando, haciendo, produciendo los diseñadores más importantes del planeta. Arquitectos, diseñadores, diseñadoras, diseñadores de moda, de comunicación visual, de paisaje, van pasando por las conferencias inaugurales inspirando a nuestros estudiantes, que ese es el gran objetivo de las conferencias inaugurales. Empezar un semestre con ánimo, con fuerza, con inspiración, con ganas de proyectar futuro, que en definitiva es lo que nos compete como diseñadores, sea cual sea el área del diseño en el cual estemos. Esta es una conferencia inaugural muy especial, porque este semestre es muy especial. Estamos volviendo a la presencialidad, a tener clases en nuestras aulas, después de 1 año y medio de larga pandemia. Cabe preguntarse si vamos a volver o vamos a llegar a otro lugar. Yo creo que debemos llegar a otro lugar. No debemos volver. De algún modo el camino que hicimos, que fue muy bueno en muchas cosas, también nos trajo a este punto. El tema de la sostenibilidad está en el centro de todo esto, sin lugar a dudas. Mucho de lo que desencadenó la epidemia primero y pandemia después del COVID-19 tiene que ver con un uso de los recursos no sostenible. Mucho tuvo que ver el urbanismo, tuvo que ver la ciudad, el diseño, el desarrollo, en esta lógica que fue dando lugar a la aparición de este virus y otras tantas situaciones preocupantes para el planeta. Por lo que la temática de esta conferencia inaugural es especialmente importante en este contexto que estamos viviendo. En ese sentido, Lynda Grose es realmente tiene una producción, una trayectoria, un pensamiento realmente inspirador en este sentido. Ella decía anteriormente que le interesaba mucho Sudamérica, que ha tenido la posibilidad de visitar Brasil y otros países de Sudamérica, y les interesaba la producción por estos lugares del mundo, en el entendido de que aquí se está produciendo y pensando con bajos recursos. Y esto muchas veces lleva a la necesidad de la sostenibilidad como un elemento central. Creo que tenemos una enorme responsabilidad, todos, pero de este lado del planeta, y Lynda nos lo hizo sentir claramente antes de que se habilitara la sala, tenemos una doble responsabilidad, que recibimos con orgullo, como desafío. Es por eso que le damos la bienvenida a todas y todos a esta conferencia inaugural, muy especial, insisto, en tanto significa de algún modo también el retorno a las aulas, en un momento muy especial que estamos viviendo, y agradecemos muy especialmente y muy sinceramente a Lynda que nos acompañe hoy y que haya tenido la muy buena disponibilidad de compartir con nosotros esta conferencia. Muchas gracias. Adelante, Lucrecia, gracias.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Marcelo. Antes de presentar a Lynda y de darle lugar a que inicie la conferencia, me gustaría hacer dos puntualizaciones. Primero es que, como muchos de ustedes deben de saber, esta conferencia cuenta con traducción simultánea. Para acceder a la traducción simultánea, ustedes tienen la posibilidad de, en el recuadro de la pantalla de Zoom, sobre la esquina derecha inferior, van a ver un cuadradito que dice interpretación, y ahí pueden elegir el canal con el que quieren escuchar la conferencia, en español o en inglés. Pueden en cualquier momento saltar de un canal al otro, o sea, darse la oportunidad para escuchar en inglés, español y volver. Eso por un lado. Por otro lado, comentarles que está deshabilitado el chat general, pero que nosotros vamos a estar recibiendo en el correr de la conferencia las preguntas que tengan para hacerle a Lynda en relación a su charla. Nosotros vamos a estar haciendo una selección de las preguntas, y una vez que termine la conferencia, vamos a invitarlos a quienes formularon esas preguntas, a que abran su micrófono y sean ustedes quienes realicen esas preguntas. Entonces nosotros vamos a hacer una selección de, no sé, 3, 5 preguntas, vamos a habilitar y vamos a dar el espacio a que las hagan. Si quieren hacerlas en inglés las pueden hacer, si las quieren hacer en español, la intérprete se la va a traducir a Lynda. ¿Bien? Bueno, ahora sí, entonces voy a presentar a Lynda. Tenemos, la verdad, que un privilegio enorme de tener entre nosotros a una de las indiscutidas referentes y pioneras en relación a la moda y a la sustentabilidad. Y digo entre nosotros, y no con nosotros, porque como bien comentaba Marcelo, ella iba a estar en persona en Uruguay, y el COVID hizo sus propios planes, pero la tenemos entre porque la hemos tenido muy cerca. Yo no les puedo explicar el compromiso y el cariño que puso Lynda en la elaboración, tanto de la conferencia como el workshop que vamos a compartir la semana que viene. Para los que no conocen el trabajo de Lynda, Lynda trabaja en moda y sostenibilidad desde hace más de 30 años. Es cofundadora de la línea de Collection, lanzado en 1992 por la marca Spirit. Esta línea de vestimenta fue la primera ecológicamente responsable, comercializada internacionalmente por una compañía y pionera en establecer estándares posteriormente adaptados por la industria de la moda. Grose es además profesora titular y catedrática de diseño de moda en la Universidad de California College of Arts de San Francisco, donde enseña moda y sostenibilidad. Esta universidad ha trabajado intensamente para la formación de una cátedra de prácticas sostenibles. Es coautora, junto a Kate Fletcher, del libro Fashion and Sustainability Design for Change, además de participar en otras tantas publicaciones. Es miembro fundadora de la Union of Concerned Researchers in Fashion, que recibió muchos reconocimientos por su trabajo revolucionario en el mundo de la moda sostenible. Y también colabora con el Comité Asesor de Houston Textiles, que tiene sede en California, y con el grupo de expertos sobre transparencia de Remake. Grose es una apasionada de la sostenibilidad y del potencial del diseño para darle forma a una sociedad sostenible. Se desempeña activamente como diseñadora, consultora, educadora, en una amplia variedad de ámbitos. Y esto, que es una apreciación personal, me atrevo a decirles que además es encantadora, que maneja una energía hermosa, y que por lo tanto va a ser un placer compartir este espacio con ella. Así que, Lynda, adelante.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. Really wonderful. I'm going to, I think I'm going to share my screen. So bear with me. Can everybody see that? Yes, good. Thank you again for having me at your college. I am so happy to be here with the people in Uruguay, and I look forward to the conversations after the presentation and also next week. I understand that most of our audience today are designers and design instructors. And so I'm going to speak as a designer to designers, because as creative people, I think we are particularly sensitive and we observe the world around us and we feel it. And then we make sense of it through our work. Wade Davis, an American anthropologist, says, we make sense of sensations. And in this period of ecological crisis, I think we're all wanting to find ways to feel useful and to take action versus feeling helpless in the face of failing ecological systems. So I'm going to share my own observations and sense making over several years as I've been seeking out what it means to be a designer at this time, what it means to do sustainable design. I've come to some common sense conclusions for me, but this is a work in progress, and I welcome the collective wisdom of everybody present here today. So I'm going to start with a definition of fashion, which we translated into Spanish, but I'm going to give my English translation. To mold, give, form, or shape a material or immaterial object. And I think this is really important to emphasize the immaterial aspects of fashion, because designers and the fashion industry are highly focused on the physical product. It's the core of our craft and of our businesses. But as designers, we know that material culture of designed objects and fashion in particular, the social coding and the messaging to each other is highly potent for humans. And potency is most often manipulated by industry to sell more stuff. As designers, we can bend that cultural knowledge and acuity to sustainability outcomes. And this is critical because it's now commonly accepted that there's a fourth pillar of sustainability, and that is culture, changing culture, and specifically changing the culture of consumption and the ideology of unrestricted growth is critical to make real ecological advances. So I'll explain that a little bit more through the presentation, but I first want to give you some visual references to my background and how I was first exposed to sustainability. It was while I was working as a conventional designer at a spree in San Francisco, and the owner wanted to use his business to raise awareness and to be an example of change. And he commissioned an eco audit of the company, and I simply joined the audit, looking at the water use and energy use of the company, plastic hangers, plastic bags, things like that. But as a designer, I also started to look at the product itself, and with a small group of colleagues within the company, made a proposal to the owners for an ecologically responsible line of clothing. And that was known as eCollection, which was launched in 1992 at retail. It was a 2-year research project in which we identified the issues within the products and then brought viable alternatives to market. So, for example, cotton was 90% of Espree's business at that time. And we came to understand the chemical use in cotton cultivation and brought organic cotton to market. We realized the toxic chemical dyes that are used on wool, often that are chrome-based, and instead used naturally colored wool and recycled wool, where the color from the previous life of the garment was shown in the product. So you can get the sense of there's always a creative solution to a technical issue. And I could go on into more detail, but the main point that I want to make about eCollection is that as a global fashion brand, Espree helped to populate an approach to fashion and sustainability that interrogates the product and notes where the company is in that category, and then improves upon it. But this approach has proven to be grossly inadequate because products exist within larger business systems, and those business systems are required to grow each year. It's known as the growth imperative. And incremental improvements on products just can't keep pace with that growth. I want to give Patagonia as an example, because not to particularly criticize Patagonia per se, but they are considered a gold company, a gold standard company in the area of sustainability. And all other companies look to them, what they're doing, as a measure of where they are, and they follow them as a leader. So if you look at their annual benefit corporation report of 2019, the company readily admits that we are making progress towards becoming a carbon neutral company. But even as we make significant improvements, our carbon footprint is increasing because of our growth in sales. Now, I want to make this visual for you since we're a creative audience here. A company's sustainability claims might sound something like this. This product is, say, 25% recycled polyester. But what that means is that 75% of the product isn't. Or you might hear, for example, 25% of our revenue now comes from resale. That means that 75% of the revenue still comes from new products. And in a growth business model, over time, that 75% unsustainable part of the business grows exponentially faster than the sustainable part each year. We fall further and further behind in actual ecological gains. And this is really simple math. Essentially, the growth logic of our businesses and commerce in general thwarts our ecological intentions. And none of us, not even our gold standard companies, seem able to wrest ourselves from the hard-nosed grip of that growth imperative. Well, as a designer, I am an optimist. I've always seen pain points as the next point of innovation. I also take great inspiration from Arturo Escobar, who in his wonderful book, Design for the Pluriverse, encourages us to break away from and de-link from this mainstream ideology of unrestricted growth. In these spaces, then, new values can be fully expressed and come to light so that people can recognize the difference. And new knowledge is freed up so new cultures and ecologies can be born. I want to take color as an example, just as a simple example to so that we can feel this different way of thinking. So the little black dress is a global cultural icon. It's known as an elegant classic piece. Every woman needs one in her wardrobe. But through a sustainability lens, it takes a lot of dips and a lot of very high temperatures to achieve a good dark black. That's a lot of water and energy at a time of peak everything, really. What if we made a color with just one or two dips and change that iconic piece into the little gray dress, which is a much more appropriate cultural icon for this time? Who creates these cultural icons to begin with? It's designers. So as we disconnect from existing cultural holds and are able to free our minds, Escobar further encourages us to reconnect in more appropriate ways to materials, products, to ourselves, and to nature. Jonathan Chapman's new book, Meaningful Stuff, Design That Lasts, features this wonderful cup, which is partially glazed in a honeycomb pattern, so that some of the porcelain remains exposed and porous. And over time, with increased use, the stain of the beverage makes the pattern more distinct. Each cup responds to and reflects the use of the individual owner, each taking on a different character over time. It's a really beautifully poetic, simple idea, beautiful product. Yellow dress also uses stains as a cultural entry point. This vintage dress was stained by strawberry juice at a friend's wedding, and rather than discarding it, embroidering over the stain with the names of the friends who got married and the date of their wedding refreshed the garment. It made me love the dress even more. And it also created a bond between me and my newly married friends. But it also changed the dress itself from being a static piece to one that can receive familiar or similar treatments over time. Both of these concepts render stains culturally acceptable and connect us more closely to the material products. Sacha Douer, that's a close-up of the embroidery there. Sacha Douer is a colleague of mine at CCA, and she works with natural dyes. She observes that due to the globally ubiquitous use of synthetic dyes, we've lost our sense of color. She works with chefs to arrange dinners using local foods in season. Guests bring an item to dye and use the waste food from the dinner preparation to create a color bath. By tapping into what's already culturally accepted, eating local foods in season, this artist suggests that we might also dress in seasonally and locally available colors. So these poetic, culturally based design approaches inspire change through pleasure, delight, care, conviviality. They prompt deeper understanding about true sustainability. One of the most perverse cultural norms is the sense of shame that people have about buying secondhand clothes. As a working class kid in the north of England, growing up with a single mom, I actually felt this myself. I would groan when my mum went into a thrift store. I couldn't bear to go in with her. But in San Francisco, the tech company Trove receives garments and provides an online platform for branded resale. They take the garments, photograph them, enter the data into the online system, and they provide logistics and warehousing and shipping to the new customer as well. In this model, the natural resources embedded in the garment are used over and over again. The product isn't new, but the experience to the customer is. But also, the customers shop from their own homes online, bypassing that fear or that shame even of being seen in a thrift store. The brands that work with Trove receive revenues from selling the same garment over and over again. It's decoupled from extracting resources for new goods. And Trove is now calculating how the ecological footprint of a garment is reduced when it's sold twice, 3 and 4 times over. Also looking at how visible repairs and use stories might add to the value of the garment. This is completely different information from a normal business. New fashion language and knowledge is emerging. Trove reports that it has doubled the size of its warehouses in the past year. And we all know that re-commerce, as it's known, is outpacing conventional fashion sales. But you see how pervasive growth is as the measure of success. And as economist Joseph Stiglitz says, if we measure the wrong thing, we will do the wrong thing. Resale and recycling are utterly dependent on the waste of this old growth system. We must measure the relationship between the growth of resale and the simultaneous reduction in new product production. Otherwise, the extraction and flow of resources through the fashion system will continue to expand. And the intent is to narrow that mainstream extraction and create a pluriverse of design ideas, all working to their ecological ethics. Now, in interviewing wearers about their relationship to their clothing, we find that the reason people buy new things, the reason they participate in consuming so much at a very deep level, is a desire to feel refreshed, in a sense to refresh the self. And once we identify this deep need, we can work to satisfy it, to refresh the self in, as Arturo Escobar says, ways other than shopping. Given the realities of a globally warming planet and the associated weather patterns, and considering the effects of droughts on the one hand and floods on the other on the yields of global cotton cultivation, how might we design for a cotton-constrained world, in a sense, take care of cotton fiber already in use, while also fulfilling the wearer's desire for something new? It's an interesting conundrum. It's an interesting problem to tackle. Well, in this project, shirts were disassembled to pass through a digital printer. The test worked, and glitches informed next steps. You can see here on the front placket where the printer head that went across the front of the shirt caught on the edge seaming of the placket, informing, suggesting more simpler constructions if we were to design for garments to receive ornamentation by printing over time. The experiment revealed that garments actually don't need to be completely disassembled to go through this extra ornamentation. Only those parts that don't lie flat, the curves in the garment or where the pleats might be, need to be disassembled. So a new visual language is starting to emerge, and a revised lexicon of construction, stitches, threads, temporarily designed prints is starting to form. Sewing threads that perhaps dissolve in microwaves, which already exist. Our concepts, our sort of hierarchy of what good quality seaming is challenged when we consider designing garments from the beginning to lie flat to receive ornamentation. And the way that we design prints so that they can be layered for first, second, third, fourth lives. In this same cotton-constrained world, knitwear designers can also perhaps use cationic and non-cationic cottons to deploy and embed invisible patterns in the knits, so that later in the garment's life, when the garment needs, or the wearer needs refreshing, an over-dye service brings the invisible patterns into view, distracting the eye of the wearer in a completely different direction, and creating a sense of delight, perhaps to fulfill that desire for something new, again, in ways other than shopping. So you see how the ability to bring technical craft, knowledge, together with material culture in context with an ecological condition is in the hands of the designer. Industry is too busy in the technical supply chain. And we see this fluidity and ability to take on the complexity of sustainable design in the work even of young designers. Here, the skirt on the left is made from regenerative cellulose, and it's double-faced, constructed with ties. And the colors on one side and the other side can be arranged differently, using the ties to create one color effects or different combinations. The sweater also features these adjustable ties, and is knitted using a light rose wool yarn on the surface of the knit and a strong green polyester on the back of the knit, so that over time, as the sweater is used, more and more of the green color comes to the surface. This biological pattern becomes unique to each wearer. On the right side, the quilted coat is in 100% polyester with a print design added by heat transfer technique. A set of colored heat transfer papers accompanies the product so that the user, by ironing, can apply prints to cover stains or to change the appearance for themselves. So you see how these ideas are limitless. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of ideas. As many people as there are here today, I know that all of us have got hundreds of ideas that we can apply once we free ourselves from the stuffy constraints of growthism. We're not just prototyping new garments, but we're prototyping new logics. Multiple worlds can coexist as we thrive in fashion systems that maintain themselves within Earth's finite boundaries, like a complex ecosystem. And as we exhibit and share and popularize these glimpses of the future with the public, old myths fall apart and the new possibilities come into view and are recognized. Now, what I want to emphasize is that experimental design is more important now than ever. Companies and people really need help to imagine other ways beyond the growth imperative that has such a strong grip on our modern cultures. And I think that universities are the perfect place to conduct experiments with very little financial risk. And we can create new lexicons and new visions for the future that become useful then to the sector. That said, concepts may or may not be business ready. It doesn't really matter. It's the elastic thinking that we exercise through realizing these concepts where the true value really lies. All of us have to adapt to new unforeseen circumstances. COVID, fires, floods, disrupted supply chains, anything can happen at any time. Being able to brainstorm ideas, analyze circumstances, map out how to get where we need to be, articulate ideas, justify them, persuade people to act are all important skills for graduating students. As Annie Gullingsrud, the Director of Strategy for the startup Eon, who provides digital IDs for clothing so they can be easily sorted into recycling and resale systems, says, a zero waste project may or not be appealing to a company, but grappling with the challenges of zero waste 2D to 3D has universal applications for any company. So finally, just to bring this to a close and just re-ink my main message today, I'm joining you from San Francisco, California today. And for more than 2 decades, as was stated earlier, I've been working on fashion and sustainability, and particularly with California cotton farmers to lead cotton farm tours for the fashion industry and the public. And I've witnessed firsthand how the land and the rural communities are shaped by our emphasis on growth and productivity. Farmers in this region have had access to the best available technologies for decades: machinery, agricultural chemicals that are applied by land and by air, precision agriculture, genetic modification. Even the land is laser leveled to enable water to flow from one end of the field to the other efficiently. And these combined technologies have enabled this region to yield as much as 6 bales of cotton an acre, 4 times the global average. It's an amazing feat. of human ingenuity and technology. And yet, the surrounding rural communities are impoverished. 40% of children live in poverty, and there's 25, sometimes even as high as 85 unemployment. And this is in the 5th largest economy in the world. We must always ask, for what purpose are innovations deployed, and who exactly benefits from the gains in productivity? Meanwhile, the average American throws away 29 kilograms of clothing a year. It's about the equivalent of 32 pairs of jeans, and that's an average. So when you witness the massive mobilization of natural resources in the cotton fields, on the one hand, flowing through the fashion system to waste at the other end of the product's life, how can we not question our cultural obsession with growth? Growing more, yielding more, producing more, even designing more, to waste more. Most recently, California cotton cultivation has moved to low labor cost countries, and farmers have shifted to growing almonds, which sell at a higher price, but also take 3 times as much water as cotton. And in the California drought, farmers are now drilling down to the aquifer and pulling water out at such a rate that it's causing the land to subside. Orchards are being ripped up and chipped into compost. Some almond and pistachio farmers are now moving to Arizona to farm, where the rules on water use are more lax. And that's causing problems for those local farmers also. So what does this say about our relationship to materials, to ourselves, and to nature? I find this incredibly sad. Sad for the land, sad for the farmer, certainly sad for the trees. California water signs suggest that the conditions are political, when they're actually ecological and moral. Growthism creates scarcity and poverty, and it's not working. But remember earlier, I said I was an optimist, and I am. And there are some farmers who are working, sometimes out of necessity, but nonetheless working on regenerative agriculture. They are changing that industrialized landscape. They're bringing animals onto the land to fertilize the soil. They're planting hedgerows to invite wildlife and pollinators into the land. And they're relearning how to work with nature rather than dominating over it. And we, as designers, can align ourselves with these farmers to break up the industrialized fashion landscape. And we can align with economists like Jason Hickel, who's working at the political level, and with anthropologists like Arturo Escobar and those working at the community level, to help create a new collective vision of post-growth abundance so people can see the difference. So I just want to end by saying that Uruguay has a very different perspective than the global north. What can Uruguayan designers uniquely contribute to help build a pluriverse that extends beyond products and businesses and the industry and the economy? Excuse me a second. To extend beyond products, beyond business, beyond the industry, and beyond the economy, and which really enriches the ecology in which all of this human activity sits. So I'll leave you to sit with this message. And thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm happy to take any questions.
Oh, thank you very much, Lynda. I think Zoom needs something like big applause, because when the conferences finish, it's like we need to make noise and say thank you, and Zoom won't allow us to do that. But maybe we can stop sharing screen. I have a couple of questions. Here. También recuerden que estamos tengo los subtítulos prendidos y me estaba enloqueciendo. Nada, recuerden que por el chat estamos recibiendo preguntas. Igual tenemos un par de preguntas por acá. Caro, por Adosu, no sé si te puedes desmutear, que tenías unas preguntas varias por ahí.
Bueno, rompo el hielo, entonces intento. Y luego me pareció súper motivadora y disruptiva la charla y la impronta que nos acercó Lynda. Yo voy a hacer algunas preguntas vinculadas a lo formativo, a la formación de diseñadores, en particular de diseñadores textiles. No es que no tenga otras, pero bueno. Tengo 3 preguntas y para que Lynda vaya comentando a medida en la forma que lo considere mejor. Una tiene que ver en cuanto a la formación actual de los diseñadores, en qué nos tenemos que focalizar como instituciones de educación del diseño para la formación de los diseñadores textiles hoy. Otra es vinculada como a la transición que visualizo que se dio desde el mercado, ¿no? En esto del diseñador tradicional en el no convencional. Bueno, y cómo ves tú o qué sugerencias tienes para justamente la transición en cuanto a la formación de diseñadores hacia diseñadores no convencionales, digamos. Y la tercera viene vinculada con los que nos van a seguir a nosotros, los niños, las niñas, los adolescentes, que ellos hoy ya están viviendo algo distinto a lo que vivimos cada uno de nosotros en nuestra experiencia formativa y de vida, ¿no? Porque están viendo y absorbiendo distintas formas de consumir, de existir. Y bueno, cómo se podría vincular esto, que es un potencial, me imagino, para la formación de diseñadores de aquí a un futuro, digamos. Me gustó mucho este concepto que tú utilizaste de la conformación o de la creación de esta nueva mirada colectiva sobre, en este caso, sobre diseñadores, formas de producir, y formas de existir y el vínculo que se genera. La dejo por acá y no acaparo más. Gracias.
You can go on, Lynda.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear a translation.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
Carolina, I'm sorry, but you would have to to go with your question again. Maybe you can do it in English if you feel sure.
Okay, I'm sorry, Lynda. I try my best. I will associate my questions to the formative view of the designers, particularly the textile designers. So the first one is regarding to what we have to focus as institutions of education of design in the education of textile designers. The second one is how to make this transition from the traditional designer to the non-conventional designer. What are your suggestions? And the third one is about the link, or if there is any link between this education and the children today. So I've said before in Spanish that I put this, I share this with you and with the other participants, and so you can answer the way you like, in the order you like and you feel. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think what I'm understanding is what can textile designers do in institutions to be working towards this post-growth vision. And I would say whatever skills we have, I think what's important is the vision. And then we can bring whatever skills we have to that vision. So I showed examples, like several different examples, whether it was deconstruction, reconstruction, designing for disassembly and several lives. That's more of a constructed idea, although there was printing also included. There was different types of printing on different types of fabrics, you know, the polyester and the transfer printing, and also knitwear. So whatever our skills or our interests are, I think that's a really important starting place, because we're already passionate about that. And if it's the bigger vision that we're working towards, then we can apply that passion in very unique ways. It's a very, very productive, rich way of working. I prefer that way rather than trying to decide technically which is the best fiber over another fiber, because all the different fibers have a different impact at different parts in their life cycle. And the science is not at all complete on preferencing one fiber over another. So and in any case, if you're improving the fiber and it still exists in a product, in a business model that is growing, those improvements don't have much impact. The biggest impact we can have is by using textiles or techniques towards this post-growth vision, if that's helpful. So whether it's designing prints to evolve over time, having to think what that might look like, how to line up the print to receive a second layer. There's, you know, there's reductive ways as well, like laser etching into to take color out. There's all kinds of, once you start talking brainstorming, there's too many ideas really to, you know, apply this thinking. So I hope that answers that question.
Yes.
Regarding going from being a traditional designer to a non-conventional designer, it's probably easier now to do that than it was back in 1990s when I left Esprit, because there weren't that many people working on sustainability issues. And so what you can do as a designer is you can choose to work for a responsible company. You can choose to start your own company, as people are doing increasingly. Specific, that's, you know, we have lots of startups in San Francisco. I don't know what it's like in Montevideo, but That's another option. What I encourage students to do, young designers to do, is to take it easy on themselves. We're in this huge wave of transition. I like to talk about an arc of practice, going from regular design to ecological design, let's say. And wherever you find yourself to be useful on that arc of practice is a good place to be. You might find yourself working for a conventional company 80% of the time, doing your own startup work 20% of the time. Whatever you need to do to sustain yourself and your creative practice, but know where you are and why and where you want to be. So it's very practical advice that I give. And then in terms of an education and children, my observation is that the next generations of children coming through school have a really much more awareness than we did coming through, or I did coming through my school. Like, sustainable fashion design was not taught at my college. It did not come up at my school. And nowadays, there is a much greater knowledge within the students that are coming into the college to begin with. They've got eco-literacy, which can then, of course, speed and augment the changes that we want to see. So I find that to be very hopeful, but I'm not sure if that's what your question was really getting at. Does that make sense? I just want to give you an example, which it's kind of funny, but not really. But, you know, I grew up in England and went through an English education and went to an English college, and then came to America to work in the fashion industry in New York before going to San Francisco. But as you reflect on the issues and extractivism and so on and so forth, I remember when I was 13 or 14 at school, where in geography lessons, we drew a map of Australia and we had to note the territories in the country, and then what materials, what resources there were, coal, gold, cotton, to extract. We were trained in a way to be extractivists, you know, and that was my education. Whereas nowadays it may, you know, it may include indigenous regions or a much more, you know, broader, richer history. So it's just to give you one example. Very different nowadays. Is that making sense?
Perfecto. Lynda, maybe you can check if the channel that you are in is the English channel or the Spanish channel you should be, in order to listen to the translation. I think it should be in the English channel.
Okay, and where do I find the channel?
Oh, right under the screen, you will see a small thing that like a globe that says interpretation. Uh-huh. And there you can choose either Spanish or English. I think you should choose English. So
yes.
the way you will.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. And now I have a couple of more questions. Rosita, are you there? Please unmute. Or Rosita o Guillermo, el que esté, ahí se desmuteó Rosita. Rosita, no te escuchamos. Entonces, capaz que mientras Rosita soluciona el tema del audio. Guille, ¿te animás a ir vos?
Vale, hola, buenas. Voy a preguntar en español y en todo caso, si no funciona, me avisan. Mi pregunta tenía que ver en cómo lidiar con esto que planteas, que planteaste, Lynda, en la conferencia, desde Latinoamérica, donde aún digamos, las necesidades básicas no están del todo cubiertas y por lo tanto el consumo es aún, digamos, un sinónimo de dónde se va a llegar. Entonces, ¿cómo lidiar con eso sería como la pregunta?
Did you
Right.
hear the translation?
I could,
Oh, great.
yes. And you can hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so, you know, of course, I'm here in San Francisco, where the excesses are really clear. And, you know, on the one hand, we are fighting to pass a bill that will protect workers to receive minimum wage. And on the other hand, we have billionaires playing in space, you know. So clearly, you know, where I'm speaking from is very different. And I would say, you know, in general, it's acknowledged and understood that areas that do need to grow to increase the livelihoods and well-being of people, that clearly still needs to happen. It's really a big message for the industrialized countries where there's so much excess. I would say, I mean, one of the reasons why I would be excited to come down to your country is that I think, well, I think people might be looking towards America and Europe as examples, whereas I think we should be looking at you for an example of rich lives that don't need the consumption that we have. I mean, clearly the consumption that is going on in the global north or the west or whatever we want to, you know, call it, is excessive and it's not good. I mean, all the indicators are that it's not good for the well-being of people or the environment, clearly. And so I feel that we have a lot to learn from other countries that are not so excessive. So it's sort of an oblique response to your question, but I didn't mean in any way to suggest that you know, clearly the places that need to grow. It's the responsibility of the other countries that have been growing for so long and have gone way beyond the capacities that need to be checked.
Perfecto. Tengo dos preguntas. Bueno, la pregunta de Rosita, que no puede activar el audio, así que la voy a hacer yo. Y después tengo a Agustina. Vamos con esas dos preguntas. Si alguien más tiene otra pregunta, la hace por el chat, así hacemos una más y bueno, vamos redondeando. Pero voy con la pregunta de Rosita. ¿Cómo lograr cambiar el preestablecido orden económico mundial donde el mandato es producir para vender más y más, sin importar los impactos ambientales y sociales? O sea, la pregunta es ¿cómo lograr cambiar el preestablecido orden económico mundial donde el mandato es producir?
Yeah, I understand that question. So again, it can feel overwhelming. So I think it's really important to be aware of people that are working at that level, whether it's economists like Joseph Stiglitz or Jason Hickel or whoever. There are many people working at that level. What I think we can do as designers is understand what that vision is and then align what we do with our concepts to enhance and enable that vision to come. So that's what I was trying to present today, was these poetic waves giving visual form to these new orders that are sort of accessible by everyday people, right? So they're almost accessible by everyday people without even thinking about the big world order. We know that order has to change and people are working on it, but we can work in very tangible, tactile ways to envision it. So it's manageable. What it is manageable. It's within our realm of skills, right? That's my personal view.
Agustina.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Todos. Hi, Lynda. It's a pleasure listening to you. I've been working with upcycling and redesign since 2008, and you are a great reference. I'm from Uruguay, but I'm based in Sao Paulo. And I would like to ask you about high scale. How do you see these design approaches when we think on high scale applications? Because we know that industry is not only because of growth, but it is based on high scale for financial questions and also for reaching more people and worldwide. So
right,
that's the question. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is interesting, and especially, you know, when I work in a college with undergraduate students who are working on a recycling project to do one item, and that, you know, and when you do one item, it needs the hand and the eye of the designer on it all the time, and it's expensive. So what we encourage is, or expand the idea of design beyond the product to systems. So how might you replicate this garment, right? So, and then that affects the aesthetic. So it can't just be anything. You have to think, okay, I've got irregular incoming materials. I have to notice what the patterns of those materials are, which colors, what kinds of fabrics, organize them, sort them, right? And then that informs your design. I've got 90% black. Okay, everything that comes out is going to be 90% black, or, you know, so it makes, I've had young designers say, but is this design? And I was like, yes, it is. And, you know, we have to expand our notion of design. So that I personally have an issue with scale, and it's one of the things we talk about next week in the workshop, because I hear it a lot, whether it's biodesign, sustainability, new ideas, we've got to bring it to scale. And I'm like, you know, I'm used to the scale in the San Joaquin Valley of California that's massive, and we're questioning it. You know? So I'm like, well, why? Come to what scale? What is appropriate scale for this material, for this place? Why does it have to be this massive scale that we know is not matched with nature's capacities? So I think we have to let go of certain language. I do prefer replicability. I've even noticed that when a company's small, what it says, what it communicates and what it does are matched. When a company gets bigger, the people that are talking or doing the marketing and the people that are in production are separate from each other. And it's really, I'm kind of interested in what is an appropriate scale for a company where it's got ecological intelligence within the company, and what it's saying and what it's doing are the same. I think we really have to question this notion of scale. I agree it needs to be more than just one unique piece. But I think that scale is flexible according to the conditions. It's one of those things to have your hands on, be figuring it out and then justifying. that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
good. Great. I can tell you're in there working on those systems. I can tell. Yeah.
Bueno, tenemos una pregunta más. Fernando Escudar, ¿te animás a desmutearte?
Hola, Linda, gracias por compartir tu conocimiento con nosotros, un gusto. Como profesor de la EUCD, la Escuela Universitaria Centro de Diseño, y bueno, como diseñador también autoral, junto a Ana Limni, tengo unas preguntas como para hacerte, que estamos siempre discutiendo sobre esa disyuntiva de si debemos consumir menos y de mejor calidad, ¿no? Entonces, ¿cuál debe ser el diseño? ¿Perdurable o efímero? ¿Qué material puede ser el más apropiado para cada camino?
So it's interesting. So I come back to Arturo Escobar, or Escobar, however you pronounce it in Spanish, and where it's a pluriverse of ideas, right? And it's not that any one idea is wrong. It's important that it's within this vision of being post-growth and within the constraints of nature. So in this sense, a well-made garment that lasts a long time, that you keep for many years and use, is a very, very good concept. I will say that Trove, I asked the CEO of Trove, if resale is increasing so much, what does this mean for design? And he said, oh, you have to have a really strong brand. It has to be something that people want to buy again and again and again. And that would also suggest really good quality design, really good quality materials that can go back into that resale system. But also really good design. You know, when you buy a designer piece, you keep it. I mean, the studies show you keep those pieces. You know, I'm wearing my Jean-Paul Gaultier from 20 years ago, whatever it might be. So I don't think it's that there is one good or better way. I think there are many ways, and good quality garments that are long lasting are one of them. I do want to say that some companies will say, oh, we do long lasting products and therefore it's good. Check. And that I think is too simplistic. And I'll go back to Patagonia, that has really good garments. And in their marketing, they'll say we have to protect climbers who are going up K2. But I see a lot of Patagonia jackets on people who are never going to be on a mountain. They're on the streets of Paris or at the local coffee shop or wherever it is. And then you've got a garment that is over-designed, overbuilt for use. So I think we need to match the design to the use and be very aware of that.
Perfecto, Linda. Many thanks. Tenemos espacio para una pregunta más. No sé si alguien...
I'm happy to stay longer also if people
Thank you. Does anybody, alguien... mira, ahí hay una mano levantada, Renata.
Sí, hola. Thank you, Linda, very much for your conference. It was very interesting and for all the great advice. And I kind of wanted to ask you for another piece of advice when building these relationships between different actors in the society and trying to do interdisciplinary work. What advice would you give to build this? I work for an NGO and we recycle different materials and we would also make some pieces of clothing. And we work with companies and other projects. So sometimes it's hard to build those relationships and know how to frame them. And also, what is your perspective about university and the academy in managing and helping build these relationships?
Oh, how interesting. It's all about relationships, all of it. And the relationship shift as well. There was a recycler in the north of England that I worked with when I was at Esprit, John Parkinson, and he was out of the business and then came back in the business. And he's noticed 20, 30 years ago, recycling was considered very lowly. And the wool mills in the north of England, the new wool mills and the recycling industry were completely separate. And what he's noticed now is that production has gone overseas, and these woolen mills and increased awareness in the public has meant that these woolen mills are now very interested in working together with recycling. So, you know, we exist in this bigger landscape that's constantly evolving, whether it's technology or trade systems or awareness or whatever it might be. And I don't know that I have any advice, specific advice, except that like if you had a specific problem, I might be able to answer maybe, but I just think it's important to just do it. You know, it's a little bit like when you work with a design and it evolves from doing it. Like sometimes you have an idea and often when you come to make it, it changes. And so it's really by doing that you build the relationships. So you're out there, you're engaging with people already. You've probably run into some experiences that would be valuable for other people at this point that are not doing what you're doing. Can you be a bit more specific about, like, are you trying to get to a person in a particular company or a bridge between non-profit and for-profit world, or?
Yes, it's more like that, because we have, it's actually a big NGO and it has a 20-year line of work. And sometimes we have our own brand, and we also work with companies. And sometimes it goes as a sort of publicitary project for the brand that works with us. And sometimes that is hard to make it sustainable in time.
Right. So the marketing gets ahead of the doing.
Yeah, because it's like something that's once and then stops, and then you have to start all over again with another brand or something like that.
This is very familiar, because I was working with the Sustainable Cotton Project to popularize organic cotton. And then when it started being sourced overseas, to popularize then cleaner cotton that we were doing in California. And different companies will have a different reason for talking with you. And so it's a matter of understanding the psychology of the company. Like, for example, Nike did organic cotton, but the person inside that company didn't tell their marketing department. Like, she did not want the marketing department involved, because then it would get too involved, too big of a hurdle. Let's just do it, she said. Let's just do it inside. There might be, you know, it's very political. It's like a political activism where you identify someone who's useful, or there's a power structure, there's an empathy with this person. An owner might be interested you might find that they're interested in something particular, and so you use that as an entry point. So it varies from company to company. You're probably understanding that already.
Yeah, no, I understand that it has to be something very meticulous in each case.
Right. Linking arms with people, like-minded people, I find that very helpful. There's you soon find friends that you can sit with, that you reinforce each other and help each other. And it's hard work. Everyone's so busy on the normal business as usual. I don't know that that's that helpful. I think it sounds like you're doing great work to me already, but
well, thank you very much. It was useful.
Thank you. ¿Alguna pregunta más por ahí que quede en el tintero? Última
Yo
oportunidad.
quería hacer una pregunta.
Dale.
¿Se escucha? Sí.
Sí, perfecto.
Era bueno, gracias Lynda primero por la charla. Era con respecto a los tintes naturales, que a menudo se utilizan alimentos para obtenerlos, y ¿cuál era tu opinión con respecto a qué tan sostenible es usar alimentos para esta práctica?
That's a good, okay. Well, if I back up a little bit and talk about natural dyes, what I notice is that people who use natural dyes are really inspired to use natural dyes because of their because of the toxicity of synthetics, or perhaps because they don't want to use petroleum-based products. So there is less attention that's given to the water use of natural dyes and also the land use of natural dyes. So I'm not for or against. Again, I think it's a matter of choosing, being clear what the intention of using a particular dye stuff is, and then what the impacts are, and avoiding those impacts. So with Sasha Dua, she's using the waste for food, preparing food. So she's specifically focused on waste and sort of natural species in a given area. So, but if it's something that's brought up to large scale and it displaces food production, then that is a problem with an increasing population still, even if fertility is, leveling off, with, using land for natural dyes versus food production is going to be a moral issue. So I'm not in favor of that. Does that answer your question? It's a complex answer. Again.
Sí, muchas gracias.
What do you think? How do you feel about it? Do you feel the same way?
Sí, en realidad estamos investigando con este tema para la tesis, entonces como que queríamos ahí esa disyuntiva de qué tan sostenibles son los tintes naturales, por eso nos gustaba tener tu opinión.
Nosotras en verdad en particular lo estamos trabajando sobre un material que es la lana.
Yeah.
Buenísimo. Después miren el
and wool takes natural dyes very well. I want to give you, I worked in Central Asia with felt makers in Kyrgyzstan, and when I was over there, they would buy their dyes, synthetic dyes, from the local bazaar, and they were wrapped in newspaper with Russian, writing on it. And so we didn't know what the content of the dye stuff was or anything. And then they would make their dye baths, because these are artisans, right? And dye the wool, and then empty the dye bath in the garden with the potatoes and the beets. And I was, oh my God, if we're going to build a little business and this is going to expand, what? So the next trip we had a natural dye expert, Michelle Whipplinger, come, and she worked with them with natural dyes, but it brought up a whole other layer of questions. Where are these dyes going to come from? What plants are available here? When? During what season? And are we going to link these artisans in Kyrgyzstan to natural dyes from India, where then they're having to import I mean, there were lots of questions that came up where natural dyes wasn't necessarily a solution, you know. So, you know, it's complex questions. So, it's good.
Y además considerar también, perdón, también considerar los finitos que son los recursos, ¿no? Sobre todo los naturales.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then are there technologies that, you know, can extract color more efficiently? Is there lots of, we know there's lots of food waste. Well, there certainly is in the American system. There's a lot of food waste. The efficiency creates a lot of waste. So maybe that's a good use.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, ¿alguna pregunta más? Es la última oportunidad. Si no, ya vamos agradeciéndole a Lynda. If you were here in Uruguay, we usually go to lunch together.
Oh.
But I will have my lunch thinking in you, so it's sort of one way of ending this whole process.
I love to experience the culture through food as well. Love food.
Pero bueno, nada, quería recordarles a todos ustedes que el viernes que viene es la instancia del workshop con Lynda. Están las inscripciones abiertas hasta este próximo martes. El miércoles, obviamente, la participación es limitada, entonces vamos a estar comunicándonos con quienes estén, quienes participen en el workshop el miércoles. Sí van a tener algún material, porque van a ser distintas salas en donde se van a discutir distintos temas, y vamos a enviar material complementario para que puedan estar como preparados para la discusión. Y bueno, nada, recuerden, si tienen ganas de participar, inscribirse. Sí, lo que pedimos es compromiso a la participación a quienes se inscriban, porque nada, ya que los lugares son limitados, está bueno que quienes participen realmente estén ahí presentes. Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Lynda, un placer, y bueno, muchas gracias a todos por estar en esta instancia.
Invitarla a Lynda a que conozca un poco. Acá hay un montón de emprendedores de diseño autoral que se hacen a través del trabajo local, y bueno, invitarla a Lynda a conocer sobre el trabajo que se viene desarrollando tanto desde la facultad y después desde la parte de emprendedurismo, sobre todo en el trabajo con fibras locales como la lana, que Uruguay es un importante productor de lana de oveja. Entonces invitarla a ella a conocer el trabajo que se realiza desde ese lugar en busca también de una economía circular y procesos sustentables. Así que bueno, muchas gracias por estar con nosotros y compartir tu conocimiento, Lynda, nuevamente, y perdón por interrumpir esto a último momento, pero me parece necesario decirlo porque hay un montón de diseñadores que están acá presentes y que son emprendedores, y que bueno, que está bueno que quizás conozca o revise su trabajo también para estar al tanto de lo que se está haciendo desde este lugar. Muchas gracias.
Yes, I would love that. Thank you.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Chao. Chao a todos.
Chao, gracias.
Chao, gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you.